Imagine walking into your luxurious office, expecting another normal day, only to freeze at the sight before you. In the CEO's private cabin where no one dares to enter without permission, two small children are curled up, fast asleep on his leather chair, their tiny hands folded, their peaceful faces glowing with innocence, unaware of the storm their presence might create. The millionaire CEO, known for his ruthless decisions and cold heart in business, suddenly stands motionless. Who are these twins? How did they get inside the most secure office in the city? And more importantly, why are they here, in his chair? This was the beginning of a story that would shake his empire and change his life forever. The morning sun reflected off the towering glass building that housed one of the most successful companies in the city. Inside that building, every employee knew the rules. When the CEO arrived, silence followed. He wasn't just a leader, was a legend. Alexander Knight, the millionaire CEO, had built his empire from nothing. Known for his sharp suits, piercing blue eyes, and an unshakable confidence, he carried an aura that made people both admire and fear him. That morning, Alexander pushed open the heavy glass doors of his private office, expecting the usual. His assistant had already prepared his schedule: back-to-back meetings, a negotiation with investors, and a press conference in the evening. He was ready for another day of business dominance. But what he wasn't ready for was the sight that met his eyes the moment he entered. There, on his luxurious leather chair, the chair no one but him ever sat on, lay two small children, twin boys, no older than 5, dressed in plain white shirts. Their blonde hair was messy, their shoes worn out, and yet, their faces looked peaceful, as if they had found the safest place in the world to rest. For a long moment, Alexander froze, his brows furrowed in disbelief. "What the fa?" he whispered under his breath. His reputation was built on order, precision, and control. His office was his sanctuary, guarded by security that allowed no mistakes. And yet, here were two children, asleep in the very symbol of his power. His first instinct was anger. How did they get in here? He muttered sharply, his voice low but dangerous. He reached for the phone on his desk, ready to summon security, but then he stopped. The younger of the twins stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft sigh, curling closer to his brother. Alexander noticed the way they clung to each other, as though the world outside was too cruel, and all they had was each other. His hand froze on the phone. For the first time in years, his heart hesitated before his mind could decide. Just then, his assistant, Clara, knocked and entered. Her eyes widened when she saw the sight. "Sir, I don't know how they got in. Security is investigating. Should I call someone to remove them?" Alexander looked at her, his jaw tight. Normally, he would have barked an order without hesitation. But this time, something inside him resisted. Instead of answering immediately, he walked closer to the twins. He studied their small faces, the dirt smudged on their cheeks, the faint shadows of exhaustion beneath their eyes. "Not yet," he finally said, his voice calm but firm. Clara looked stunned. "Sir, not yet," he repeated, his gaze still fixed on the children. "I want to know who they are, and why they're here." The assistant nodded reluctantly, stepping out to handle the chaos building in the hallway. Alexander stood silently. His thoughts conflicted. He had spent years building walls around himself, never allowing distractions or emotions to cloud his judgment. His business decisions were ruthless. He had shut down entire companies without blinking, fired people in seconds, and cut ties with anyone who slowed him down. Yet, here he was, unable to order the removal of two children who had dared to invade his space. As the twins continued sleeping peacefully, Alexander slowly sat on the edge of his desk, watching them. His mind tried to find logic. Perhaps they were connected to someone in the building. Perhaps this was some kind of setup. But deep down, another part of him stirred. A part he hadn't felt in years. He remembered his own childhood, the small, cramped apartment, the nights he had gone hungry, the loneliness that had shaped him into the man he was today. He had vowed never to feel that weakness again. Money had become his shield, power his weapon. But looking at these children, memories long buried began to surface. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft breathing of the twins. Alexander leaned back, his eyes narrowing, torn between his instinct as a businessman and the sudden pull of something more human. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his life would begin to change. And while the city outside continued its usual rush, inside that office, a powerful man found himself standing at a crossroads. All because of two small boys who had unknowingly walked into his world. The soft sound of footsteps outside grew louder. Soon, Clara returned, her face pale. "Sir," she whispered nervously, "security found no records of these children entering through the main gate. No cameras picked them up. It's as if they just appeared here." Alexander's brows furrowed deeper. That was impossible. His building was one of the most secure in the city, guarded at every corner. For two children to slip past all of it didn't make sense. The twins began to stir, their little bodies shifting on the oversized chair. Slowly, their eyes opened. Big, innocent, sky-blue eyes blinked up at the towering figure of the CEO. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then one of them, the slightly older-looking twin, whispered softly, "Are you the man from the picture?" Alexander froze. "What picture?" The boy rubbed his sleepy eyes and pointed toward the desk. Confused, Alexander glanced over. On his desk sat a single framed photograph he rarely paid attention to, a picture taken long ago, back when he was young and struggling. In it, he stood beside a woman with kind eyes. A woman he once loved but had long lost. His chest tightened. He turned back to the children. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but carrying a weight he couldn't hide. The younger twin spoke this time, his voice trembling. "Mama told us if we ever got lost to find you." Alexander's breath caught. For the first time in years, he felt his composure slipping. These weren't just random children. They knew something about him, something he wasn't ready to face. Clara stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, should I call social services? Maybe they're mistaken. Maybe leave us," Alexander interrupted sharply, his eyes never leaving the twins. Clara hesitated, but the tone of his voice left no room for argument. She quietly stepped out, shutting the door behind her now. It was just him and the children. Alexander lowered himself to their level, crouching in front of the chair. His sharp, commanding presence seemed to soften as he looked into their fragile eyes. "Tell me," he said gently, "what's your mother's name?" The boys exchanged a nervous glance before whispering together, almost in unison, "Lila." The name struck Alexander like a bolt of lightning. Memories rushed back, the late nights he spent with Lila, the laughter, the promises, the way she had looked at him as if he was more than just a man chasing wealth. He had left her years ago, choosing ambition over love, convinced that emotions only made a man weak. He never saw her again, and now two children were standing before him, speaking her name. "Where is your mother?" Alexander asked, his voice quieter now, a hint of fear hidden beneath his authority. The older twin lowered his eyes. "Mama's gone." The younger one's voice cracked as he added, "She told us to find you. She said you're our family now." Alexander felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. His heart raced, his thoughts tangled. Could it be true? Were these children his children? No, he refused to believe it so easily. Yet, looking at them, he couldn't deny the resemblance. The same blue eyes, the same sharp jawline. The pieces were falling into place, whether he wanted to accept them or not. The CEO who once thought he had control over everything suddenly felt powerless. He had faced hostile takeovers, cutthroat negotiations, and media storms without flinching, but the presence of these two fragile boys broke through every defense he had built. He stood up, pacing the room, trying to regain control of his thoughts, but the twins watched him silently, their little hands gripping each other tightly, as if afraid he might send them away. Finally, Alexander stopped. His voice was low but firm. "If what you say is true, then everything changes." The boys tilted their heads, not fully understanding, but they felt the gravity in his tone. For the rest of the day, Alexander canceled all his meetings. The staff outside whispered in shock he never canceled anything. Yet behind those office doors, he sat with the twins, asking them questions, listening to their story. They spoke of their mother, of the small apartment they had lived in, of the sickness that had taken her away. They spoke of her final words telling them to find the man who would protect them. And now, here they were by the time evening fell. Alexander knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. For years, he had believed that success was measured in wealth, power, and influence. But now, two small boys were sitting in his chair, reminding him that there were battles far greater than boardroom wars, the battle to protect, to nurture, to love. And as he looked at them, his possible sons, he knew he was about to face the most difficult decision of his life. Night had fallen over the city, but the lights inside Alexander Knight's office still glowed. The usually cold and commanding space felt different now, softer, warmer, because of the two children sitting inside. The twins, exhausted from the day's events, had curled up again in the leather chair, their heads resting against each other. Alexander stood near the window, staring out at the skyline. His reflection on the glass looked unfamiliar to him. For the first time in years, he saw a man conflicted, not the unshakable CEO everyone feared, but a man who suddenly carried a weight he didn't know how to bear. His thoughts spiraled. He could ignore this call, child services, let them take the twins away, continue his life as though nothing had happened. That was the practical choice, the choice Alexander Knight, the businessman, would make. But deep inside, a voice he had buried long ago whispered otherwise. He turned back to the chair, watching the boys sleep. The resemblance was undeniable. Their small faces mirrored his own features, proof that fate had brought them here for a reason. Memories of Leela haunted him, the woman he had loved but left behind. She had trusted him enough, even in her final moments, to send the twins to him. And here they were alone, vulnerable, with no one else in the world. Alexander clenched his fists, torn between fear and responsibility. Could he do this? Could he be more than just a ruthless CEO? The silence was broken by a soft knock. Clara stepped in carefully. She held a folder in her hands. "Sir," she said gently, "we managed to find some records. The children, they really are who they claim to be. Their mother Lila passed away 2 weeks ago. She left a letter addressed to you." Alexander's chest tightened. His hands trembled slightly as he took the folder. Inside was a sealed envelope with his name written in Leela's handwriting he had not seen in over a decade. With unsteady fingers, he opened it. The letter was short, but every word cut deep. "Alexander, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't blame you for the choices you made. But I ask you for one last favor: protect them. They are innocent, they are yours, and they need you. Please don't let them suffer the way we once did." Leela, the paper slipped from his fingers. His heart pounded as guilt and grief collided inside him. He had spent years chasing wealth, thinking it would fill the emptiness within. But in this moment, he realized the true emptiness was the absence of love he had turned away from. Clara placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Sir, what will you do?" Alexander looked at the twins again. For the first time, his decision was not about profit or power, it was about family. He walked over to the chair, gently kneeling down beside them. One of the boys stirred awake, his small hand reaching out instinctively, brushing against Alexander's sleeve. The CEO's throat tightened. Slowly, he placed his hand over the child's, whispering, "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a promise. The following weeks changed everything. The media went wild when rumors spread that Alexander Knight, the ruthless millionaire, was suddenly seen with 2 children at his side. Business rivals mocked him, claiming he had gone soft. Shareholders worried about distractions, but Alexander no longer cared. He enrolled the twins in school, hired the best caretakers, and made sure they had everything they needed. Yet, more than wealth, he gave them something he had denied himself: time, love, and protection. For the first time in years, he laughed genuinely when the boys played around his office, their innocent joy melting away the ice that had surrounded his heart. Slowly, his empire began to change too. He introduced policies for working parents in his company, started foundations for children in need, and opened his doors to causes he once ignored. The world saw a different side of him, not just a CEO, but a father. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Alexander knew one thing for sure. The day he found those twins sleeping in his chair was the day his life truly began. Because in that single moment, power, money, and ambition faded into the background. What remained was love and the family he never knew he needed. And so, what began as an ordinary morning for Alexander Knight, the millionaire CEO, turned into the most extraordinary chapter of his life. 2 little boys, asleep in his chair, not only changed the direction of his empire, but also awakened a part of his heart he thought was gone forever. This story reminds us all that sometimes, life's greatest treasures don't come in the form of money, power, or success. They come in the form of love, family, and unexpected blessings that arrive when we least expect them. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and emotional stories. Your support helps us continue bringing real, heartfelt narratives that remind us of the values we often forget in the rush of life. Stay tuned, the next story might just change the way you see the world.